Welcome back to Ride Like a Local, Season 12, Episode 1. This is Segment 2 with Mr. Paul Murphy of Meticulous Moto Restorations at the YEG Motorcycle Show. Let's look back again now. I come back to all of these beautiful lines. And when we look at the different fairings, you have one that's a bubble. You have one that's almost a perfect slant. You have ones that are open up high, ones that are open down low. What does that shield actually do for the performance of the bike?
I think the best way to answer that is if we look at this bike here. This is a Bimota SB2. It has a Suzuki GS750 motor, which is the first four-stroke motor that Suzuki ever built.
Okay.
Because prior to this engine, Suzuki were strictly a two-stroke company. So when Suzuki introduced the GS750 motorcycle, that was the best performance motorcycle at the day. So Massimo Tamburini, who was the designer of Bimota, and he is the TA in the name Bimota, he used this engine to build his first mass-produced street bike. Now, when I say mass-produced, there was only 140 of these models built. They're extremely rare. So this bike was designed in 1977. This actual bike is a 1978 bike. So if you look at the handlebars, you can see that the fairing completely encloses the handlebars. These shapes in the fuel tanker for the rider's knees, elbows here, and believe me, even at my height, at over 6 foot, I fit into this bike very, very well. As a track day bike, it is so far ahead of its time. But as a road bike, it's not the most comfortable road bike.
I bet not.
No.
However, the seat looks like it did pound your butt pretty hard.
Well, yeah. The stretch from the seat to the handlebars is a long one, to say the least. The distance from the foot pegs to the seat is quite short.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is not a long-distance touring bike. That is for absolute sure.
This is definitely meant for track days.
Absolutely. However, the brief for Bimota at the time was to build a Grand Prix motorcycle for the street.
Right.
And that is exactly what they have done. This motorcycle model is a groundbreaking motorcycle. If I can show you here, the swing arm pivots on the same axis as the drive sprocket. So chain tension never varies. Another unique point about this model is that this is the first motorcycle ever to have rising rate monoshock rear suspension. Also, it uses eccentric adjusters for adjusting the chain. And one of the very unique parts of this motorcycle is that right here, the front part of the frame separates from the rear part, and that can be taken off in 20 to 25 minutes, whereby you then have full access to the top of the motor for intervention. Absolutely unique. It's a fabulous system. Another very unique part of this motorcycle is that the headstock angle is at 24 degrees. However, the forks are at 26 degrees because the bores in the triple clamps are angled out 2 degrees, and that's why the triple clamps are numbered to make sure that they are in proper pairs. The reason for that was that the bike has a sharp headstock angle to promote quickness of steering,
Right.
but at the same time, they've maintained somewhat of a wheelbase to promote high-speed stability.
Right.
So this is a very, very unique motorcycle. There is no subframe from the back of the fuel tank back. This whole structure here is all self-supporting. Very unique. The wheels are magnesium, which would have been extremely rare at the time, and I believe that they were cast by Campagnolo to Bimota's own design. They also use Ceriani 35mm Grand Prix forks. Again, at the time, that was the best top shelf parts. Brembo brakes, cast iron brakes, and two-piston Brembo calipers. And at the time, Bimota claimed that they were lightened calipers because they machined the Brembo logo off the calipers. Whatever.
Again, though, I want to talk about this fairing.
Sure.
The fairing itself, the angle, the shape, is so unique. How does that affect the aerodynamics of the bike?
Okay. Well, if you take a side view of the fairing here, first of all, you can see that the headlight is enclosed. So the whole design here is to promote a lesser frontal area, but at the same time to guide the wind in front of you away from the rider. Assuming that in a race situation, the rider is tucked in under the bubble, his hands and arms are completely enclosed by this section of the fairing here. So that whole shape promotes aerodynamics. This bike was also, I think it was 80 pounds lighter than the stock Suzuki GS750.
80.
I think it was 80 pounds.
How the hell did they find 80 pounds to shave?
Well, magnesium wheels,
Yeah.
4-to-1 exhaust system, a much chrome moly tubing for the frame, very thin, very light, but very strong. Lots of things that have promoted the lightness of this bike. Yeah, I think they're the main features of this model. And
Absolutely stunning bike. It's, the stance of it, it looks like it's going fast without it even moving. It's just got that stance to it. It's got
Yes,
that.
it does.
I realize Suzuki and Ducati are very much at odds with each other when it comes to the dichotomy
Yes.
of motorcycles. However, this has that same kind of aggressive look and feel, but at the same time, it maintains its sexiness.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing sexier than a beautiful motorcycle in my world.
Well, I think you've hit the nail right in the head there. I mentioned earlier on that I was invited down to bring this bike to the Peterson Museum. Paul d'Orleans, who owns the Vintagent publication, it was Paul that called me and asked me could he have this bike, because he said it is the epitome of sexy motorcycles. And he...
If I'm on the same level as the Vintagent when it comes to deciding what looks sexy, I feel honored.
Well, Paul said it before you, so I think
you're
you're
on the same page as him, I feel honored.
Welcome to that club.
Yeah, no kidding.
So that's really about as much as I can tell you of the main features on this bike.
So let me ask you a question. When you quit racing, when you quit, being on the track and doing the circuit and that kind of thing,
I still do track days.
you still do track
Yes.
days. So do you find that working on the bikes is more satisfying because you were a racer and you understand what that machine was supposed to do?
I think the real answer to that question is that when you're a rider and you understand what the various systems are doing on the motorcycle, for what I do in my restoration work and the parts that I make and design myself, I think my prior experience is absolutely paramount in that regard. I try and make parts that first of all are functional, that are as light as they can be, made from various different materials, aluminum, titanium, whatever. But I also try and make my parts look very nice and have a very strong aesthetic as well.
I have a question for you. Have you ever met a bike builder by the name of Roger Goldhammer?
No.
Roger is someone you need to meet. The two of you would probably share a pint or two and tell some pretty tall tales about motorcycles, building, and racing. Roger was I think 3 times world champion custom bike builder for the AMD Pro Shows. And he's done some very innovative stuff with import bikes. Not just Harleys, but the imports. So it's kind of interesting. to hear you talk about being a rider, being a racer, because he's the same as you. What I found in my career interviewing bike builders, painters, there's a passion that the purist has that the egoist does not have.
Yeah, I would very much agree with that. One of my peers in the US is a gentleman by the name of Kevin Duke. Kevin is a motor journalist, and he made a very interesting and accurate comment on social media at one point a couple of years ago. He said lots of people who have motorcycle collections have them because they've taken out their checkbook and bought them. He said Paul Murphy has a collection that he has built himself. And I guess in that regard, it's two very different circumstances. It was a very nice compliment from Kevin. Kevin is a very good friend of mine, a very dear friend, a valuable friend, and I was quite honored to get that comment.
No doubt. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking me through some of your collection, showing my audience a little bit about the beauty of Italian motorcycles and the joy of working on them.
The pleasure was all mine.
Join us next time for segment 3, when we actually get to see this beautiful Bimota all fired up and ready to ride.